Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. I am going to set a timer because I want to have plenty of time for questions. And you know what I've found fantastic about today is not only did Pastor Al have the power to turn Thursday into Wednesday, it's being back at Silliman, which is one of the places Rappler loves. It's the warm welcome we have had. It is listening to the president and the dean, and actually it's putting together the School of Mass Communications with the Divinity School. It's something I've never really ever had before. So I'm gonna push over here kasi short ako eh. So I'm going to try to kind of take you through that fusion of mass media and the Divinity School, right? So bear with me on this, because I was thinking about how can we help each other, right? Because in the end, that's where we are. This is my 37th year as a journalist. My Rapplers, we're walking into our 12th year as Rappler at the beginning of next year. And, you know, the co-founders of Rappler, we've never lived through such horrendous, transformative, existential times. And it isn't just journalists and press freedom. It is actually all of us. And it isn't about politics, although that's part of it. It isn't technology. And again, because that's part of it, that's what's made it worse. It isn't just about geopolitical power, right? Russia invading Ukraine. You know, today, by the way, right, we woke up to the headlines that Prigozhin, who challenged Putin, is on a plane that mysteriously crashed. So it isn't just the power play, it isn't just the money, it isn't just governance. I loved listening to scripture and then listening to the interpretation of how this affects our lives. And let me this is kind of what I tried, weirdly enough, what I tried to do in my book, How to Stand Up to a Dictator. Because how do you stand up to a dictator? You don't just wake up and say, I'm going to stand up to a dictator. Diba? It comes down to values. It comes down to layer upon layer upon layer of the present moment of the past, right? And what I love this present moment of the past, I included it in the book because it's actually a quote from T.S. Eliot where he talked about literature, and he said that the latest novel you read is affected by the fact that you read Shakespeare. But your interpretation of Shakespeare is going to be affected by the latest novel you read. This is literally, this present moment of the past is transformative for the Philippines. It is transformative for the world, right? And I would say faith and mass media and you. These three things are critically intertwined, and it begins with you. Okay, parang ano yun, no? Anong ibig sabihin doon? Kasi, like, so for me, it comes down with the book. I guess the question I want you to walk away with here is the answer I hope you'll come back to us with is this one question that goes through all of that. Mass media, our faith, and you. And that, a basic question. How honest are you? How can you speak truth if you're not honest to yourself? So it starts there, right? So in the book, in the present moment of the past, right, it's very easy to look back at our last elections in May 2022 and think about, I've spoken a lot about the information warfare, the information operations that literally changed history in front of our eyes, right? It began, when I mean information operations, social media, repetition of how a dictator or a kleptocrat, the name Marcos, in 2014 began to be transformed into the greatest leader the Philippines has ever had. That is the death by 1,000 cuts, or maybe it really is, depending on who you speak to, right? Maybe he really was, or was he? You see, this is the problem with history, and Milan Kundera, who just passed away, actually said it best. The struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. And with this very powerful technology that now connects all of us, it's easy to forget. So let me go back to the question I'd love you to answer, because you are the prophets that was referred to. It's not us. It is each of us, right? So that question, how honest will you be? In my book, How to Stand Up with Dictator, you can see that the basic foundation I went to, I struggled with religion, with faith, all of my life. And part of it was because I grew up in a very domineering Catholic family. We went to Mass every day at 6 a.m. and did the Angelus at 6 p.m. And then, when my family moved to the United States, I stopped going to Mass. And then I had to figure out, what do I believe in? And it wasn't actually until at college, when I studied all 5 world religions, that I began to see all of the religions had actually the same core battle, right? What is that core battle? In Islam, I lived a decade in Indonesia. Jihad is actually not the battle outside. Jihad is the battle within. It is your inner battle to fight for your best self. In Buddhism, the 8 Noble Truths. Well, first of all, one of the things I loved about Buddhism is if you accept that all life is suffering, then all is good. Diba? Parang, okay, that's the first noble truth in Buddhism, diba? All life is suffering. Parang you're ready for the worst already. So ox, everything is better. And then, of course, Christianity and then Catholicism. And I go back to that because in Catholicism, it felt to me like it was a lot more guilt and dogma. But, all of this is changing because a month or so ago, Pope Francis called 30 Nobel laureates together to come up. He took us to the Vatican, and that's really when I felt the immense power of the church, not just in terms of in each of us, but like really we are dealing with power and money. Sorry, I got off on that. No. Anyway, what I saw in this thing, we were pulled together to talk at the Vatican, to work for 3 days on what he called a world declaration on human fraternity. That we all have much more in common than we have differences. But the funny thing, of course, is because when we started discussion, the first thing we tried to say is there another word instead of fraternity? Parang the state secretary said, no, Maria. So anyway, so the point still is, right? Let's go to the 5 world religions. I have my clock going because, all right. So I guess that's the first. So the first step is that remember, the battle is not outside. The battle is in you. The battle is yours. It is inside each of us. And we are each struggling to be the best that we can be. That's the foundation, right? And then in How to Stand Up with a Dictator, I actually started out with, can I tell you this year I did 6 commencement speeches. How many lessons can you have in my life? Very simple. And I'll just do the key ones, 3. First is you have to draw the line, right? You draw this line where on this side you're good, you cross the line, you're evil. It has to be that clear because we have such a fantastic way of rationalizing bad behavior. Diba? Like when I first came to the Philippines in 1986 and I started working as a reporter, I was in PTV4, parang everyone kept telling me, you have to be corrupt to succeed in the Philippines. Do you have to be corrupt to succeed in the Philippines? You don't, diba? You don't. And yet, if you are a young college student trying to do your best, and you live in a system that works on connections, where meritocracy may not be rewarded, you begin to doubt, right? So, do not doubt. And I'll tell you why. Corruption is just little clubs of people who will try to get away with as much as they can. And it's a tipping point approach. How did the Philippines get endemically corrupt? Because the corrupt people justified it and convinced others to become like them. It is far tougher to say no to corruption. But when you say no to corruption and you do it the first time, you're set on your path. I say that because this would have been, oh my gosh, in the late 80s, early 90s. I was already working for CNN. The fiance of one of my best friends offered me $150,000 just to do a story that I would have done anyway. And he took me to lunch and he said, just think about it. And you don't slap somebody immediately, because normally we would, So I went home and I thought about it. I had a decade of student loans to pay off. I went to a very expensive school. Unlike the scholars in Silliman who can go to that hall that would get all of the foundation will pay for your, anyway, let me, So I went home and I thought about it, and then I woke up the next day and I thought, I would really love to be able to pay off my student loan. But then when I looked in the mirror, how can I look at myself in the mirror again? And that one little choice has set me on this path where you create your communities, we find like-minded individuals, you find your team, and you keep moving, and you create bigger and bigger circles of people who say no to corruption, who challenge power, who do the right thing. Because sometimes in our society, doing the right thing seems to be the wrong thing. Diba? When we came under attack, in 2019, February 20, so 2018 was the first time the government tried to shut Rappler down. And in 2019, I kept getting arrest warrants, right? I had 10 arrest warrants in a little over a year. So parang I was going to start to create a workflow for getting arrest warrants. And our lawyers told us, you're crazy. You have to duck if you, But in the book, I say, silence is consent, right? It changes you. So we did the right thing. And you know what? Even though Filipinos were afraid, we had support, incredible support. And that Nobel Prize actually said doing the right thing is the right thing. Because we haven't done anything differently, right? I haven't really gotten to where I need to be. So ganito siya. The first lesson is really draw the line. The second lesson is connected to that, which is some kind of honor code that goes. So in the book, you'll see I wrote about how do you make quick decisions if you want to be a good person? I had an instant one. Because if you're doing a television live shot, you actually have to constantly make quick decisions. So how do you make quick decisions? You layer, layer, layer. And the question I always asked for every decision I've had to make from the very beginning is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And all I knew was that I wanted to be a good person. I was finding my way to God. I will tell you when I found God. But it was just that. I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to be a good person, and I'm going to just do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I felt that was an easy one. The second, and this is chapter 2, is the honor code. In here, it was scriptures, it's the Bible. There are studies that actually show that people behave better when they have a code. And for me, it was the honor code of the university I went to. In every paper or every test, our professor comes in and gives us the test and then walks out. And you can bring the test to your room, you can do it in the cafeteria, but at the bottom, you have to write the honor code. And the thing I loved about the honor code is it says that not only have you not cheated, you pledge not to cheat, but that you also pledge to turn in anyone around you see cheating. When I came back to head ABS-CBN at the end of 2004, and we began a new standards and ethics manual in 2005, the honor code was there. We took a zero tolerance to corruption. And in the first 2 or 3 years, it was painful, but we cleaned it up, because it is each of us. If we each win our battle, then we keep moving forward. So that's the second one, right? The honor code. This is in chapter 2 of the book. I'm giving you the quick chapters. The third is something that in chapter 3, which is, in the book, I talk about the title of the chapter, and then my kind of personal lesson is a subtitle. So the third one is a little strange, and you may not agree with this. Chapter 3's title is The Speed of Trust. The subtitle is Be Vulnerable. Everyone tells you, be strong. We respond to strong men, that's what we want. But who do you trust? How do you develop trust? Isn't it when our shields go down and you can actually connect with whoever that person is, that you drop your shields, that you drop your ego, and you connect, right? It works. You'll have to read the book because I'm giving you a quick run through of all of it. But being vulnerable opens us up to so many ways to come together. And part of the reason I wrote the book is I think we're going to go through worse times ahead. And I'll give you that bad news at the end. So I'll give you the good news up top first, right? Chapter 4, and this brings it to the School of Journalism, to mass communications. Chapter 4's title is The Mission of Journalism. And the subtitle is Be Honest. So you see the personal lesson of honesty, that internal battle for honesty, because you can't really be honest with anyone else until you can be honest with yourself, right? So that is actually what underpins journalism. And only journalists, especially those who run businesses, the business of journalism, You know when you're extremely honest to someone in power that they can crush you. And they try, but you're still there. You still bounce up and down, diba? So be honest. This you know, right? So from CNN to ABS-CBN to Rappler, we've seen this all around the world. Media capture. In Russia, let me push it outside the Philippines first because I don't want to offend anybody. In Russia, for example, Putin systematically corrupted media, right? The oligarchs bought ads, bought the companies, and you can see it's called media capture. And then they began buying think tanks and funding think tanks. This kind of behavior is now being repeated by China, right? And it is happening in the Philippines, right? So these are all trends that you see all around the world. But you go back to, again, be honest. And I think part of the reason that we stayed the course through the 6 years of Duterte, despite what our lawyers told us, it's very bad when your lawyers tell you you're crazy. Despite that, was that we couldn't look ourselves in the mirror. When you're on the front line, if you give up, you give ground. And this leads to another critical lesson. You not only draw the line, you hold the line, right? Because the more of us who hold the line, the stronger we all get, the stronger the good gets, right? So for us, well, the first time I got arrested, I was shocked. I still remember the day. It was the day before Valentine's Day, February 13th, 2019. And I was supposed to leave at 6 a.m. the next day to interview Mahathir in Malaysia. And I was shocked because they came in around sunset. A lot of unforgettable, unconstitutional things happened. And yet we keep going. They get normalized. We need to stand for the substance of rule of law, right? And yes, it is truth to a degree, but you can also argue that truth can be relative, right? So it goes down to these values that we have, right? That's the critical part. Let me take you through because I'm running out of time. I talked about journalism, the state of journalism, the zero tolerance for corruption. Let's go to chapter 5. The title is The Network Effect, Hitting the Tipping Point. So what I mean by that is that if we can mesh, so we each have our individual battles, we create our communities, the stronger we get together, the more of a network effect we have, the more we can push a tipping point. I would argue that the Philippines, in the martial law days, I would say, particularly pre-martial law going to martial law, hit a tipping point for corruption, right? Because, and what does that mean when you hit a tipping point for corruption? More and more people agreed that they couldn't succeed in the Philippines unless they were corrupt. And they tipped the country into endemic corruption, right? I think we can come out of this, but it's going to be really hard. We continue to believe we can come out of this because we have faith. Okay, sorry. Let me keep going because I wanna ask your questions. The last ones. Let me just go in the 4 chapters left, right? So, chapter 8. The title is How the Rule of Law Crumbled from Within. Silence is consent. We watched this happen. There's a lot more there. But what led to that? Social media, which is the title of chapter 7. How Friends of Friends Broke Democracy. What do I mean by that? You know those algorithms. Algorithm is opinion in code, right? It's just an opinion in code. And yet what happened is the algorithm of growth for Facebook, for example, actually found, they A/B tested and they found that you will grow your network faster if they recommend friends of friends, right? So that meant the platform grew faster and you grew your networks faster. But here's what it did. in 2016, we all agreed on the facts. We were all in the center. Even if you're, pro Duterte or pro whoever you are, right? We agreed on the facts. We're in the AV room. That's a fact. So Friends of Friends algorithm, what happened is, after 2016, if you're pro Duterte, you moved further right. If you're anti-Duterte, you moved further left. This is only one algorithm. 2018, 2019, 2020. That's the polarizing effect of the Friends of Friends algorithm. Right? So the chapter title is How Friends of Friends Broke Democracy. And the subtitle is Think Slow, Not Fast. Because what the tech did is it pushed aside your good self. It pushed aside our internal battles to be our better selves and made you believe that everyone is corrupt, right? What it did is it played on our emotions. It fanned fear, anger, and hate. And then it polarized and radicalized. And I'm probably jumping too much into this. Let me just end it with 4 things so that then we can go into the questions. And what does this mean? What are the next year, the end of the year going into next year, what does it look like? So the last 4 chapters, chapter 9 is, actually the title is Surviving 1,000 Cuts. How do you survive 1,000 cuts? The subtitle is Believe in the Good. That's almost faith. We believe in the good, right? Because social media, by design, spreads lies 6 times faster than facts. This is an MIT study from 2018, and that was Twitter. Twitter today will be far worse under Elon Musk, right? So lies spread faster than facts. So think about it like this. It's like we walked into, the Netflix series Stranger Things. If lies spread faster than facts, the world is upside down. The incentive structure is to lie, right? Actually, at the Vatican, I told the state secretary, I said, Cardinal, we're being forced to lie. Isn't it against the 10 Commandments? Thou shalt not lie. It was great to say that at the Vatican. They did include something in the final declaration on the tech. But I guess, so essentially what we've done is we've walked into the upside down. And the incentive structure is rewarding lies. So it's almost like you have a child and you tell your child, lie, I'm going to reward you. I'm going to give you ice cream every time you lie. You're not only going to get a very fat kid, you're also going to get a real corrupted kid, right? So think values again, so we go back. So believe in the good, because the good hasn't gone away. It sounded like the good is in the room, So that's chapter 9. Chapter 10, this one was an important one, and there's a lot of stuff in each of it, but the title is Don't Become a Monster to Fight a Monster. I like that. Yeah, you like it. So the subtitle of this is, how do you not become a monster to fight a monster? Embrace your fear. Because if you embrace your fear, you can stick to your values. And this is what we did in Rappler. What we did is we figured out what are the worst things that could happen to us. What is the worst thing that could happen to me? Oh yeah, I could go to jail. Or maybe I could get, all of the bad things. And what we did as a company was we talked about it, we workflowed it, we drilled our reaction, and we prepared. And because we embraced our fear, we kept going. We stuck to our values. That, I think, it works. It really does. Chapter 10. I have 2 more. Finally, chapter 11. Hold the line. Hold the line. And the subtitle of this is Nietzsche's quote, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." I should really stop saying that, di ba? But That's chapter 11. Finally, chapter 12. And I'm going to leave you with this, right? Chapter 12, the title is Why Fascism is Winning. And the subtitle is Collaborate, Collaborate, Collaborate. Right, let me summarize this, right? If lies spread faster than facts, social media, the first generation AI, essentially has turned into a behavior modification system that is used by power. So it's power and money, where the dictator's interests and the platform's interests align. Because the more information operations, the more money the platform makes, right? So they align. What does that mean? Great quote by E.O. Wilson, who said that the greatest crisis of our time is our Paleolithic emotions, our medieval institutions, and our godlike technology. Not to be blasphemous or anything. Godlike technology. Oh, and please remind me at the end before we do Q&A where I did decide I believed in God. Because it was here in the Philippines. Anyway, so why fascism? So there's a behavior modification system. The second is it is literally changing us as human beings. This is the first generation AI, right? Which is the algorithms of distribution, the push of the crowd. An individual behaves differently in a group than they do. These are old studies from the 60s, the Ash conformity studies, but on social media, you know, it's not the wisdom of crowds, it is a mob. And I've watched these mobs form. I've been the target of the mobs. Good people turn evil, right? So why is that? We need to fight it. You need to be aware of it. Get off of it. Because it's going to get worse. And this is the second one, which is generative AI. Why will it get worse, and why is the end of the year our push for it? Well, by the end of the year, what is generative AI? Generative AI it's called a large language model foundation. They take everything on the internet and dump it into this machine. You know, garbage in is garbage out, right? So they've taken all of the crap of social media, it's called unstructured big data, and they've dumped it in the LLM, as well as everything else that they can have. Last night, I did a test. You know, a friend of mine who doesn't subscribe to the Wall Street Journal went into one of the large language models and asked for the entire article on Wall Street Journal. She got it. So even if they say they don't take it, they do, right? So everything that you put on the internet is eaten up by this, but they don't know what's going to happen to it. It was released November 2020, last year, November 2022, but a few months before, 4 months before, in August 2022, the people who were working on AI said that if they release this as is, that 50% of them believed there was a 10% or greater chance that it would lead to an extinction event, as in us. So we're creating something with such hubris and worshiping false gods, right? So to go back to my divinity school, it's a weird, tough time. And I guess I want to end with this. The battle begins with you. The way we win the battle begins with you, because the war isn't in Ukraine. It's in your pocket. It starts here. It starts with your values. It starts with your faith. It starts with the communities you build. I'm going to end with where I decided God exists. Weird, no? 1991, Ormoc, the flash flood, right? 10,000 people dead. And depending on who you talk to, this always happens. You know, depending on who you talk to, local government will minimize it. Government will minimize it. The disaster groups will actually give you higher numbers. But I was there. You know, we drove up. I got out on the bridge, and the smell was so bad. We had white we put the stuff there, and I get out of the car and I step on something squishy, and I almost threw up because it was the hand of a person, right? Like, such devastation, and what made me believe, actually, again, it was a simple thing. A few days in, there was a mass grave. We had 600 bodies were buried in a mass grave. I was a young reporter at that point, and I was struggling, looking for, this cannot just be tissue. We are more than this. And I think that's when I took a leap of faith, because it is faith. And I believed in God. So, anyway, how to stand up to a dictator requires the knowledge of mass media, of the power of journalism to push back against power, and boy, oh boy, requires tremendous faith. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to listen to the Maria Ressa. Maria, thank you very much. I know this is the second time you've been here in Silliman. If I remember it right, you were here like 2008 or 9. And yes, we had it at the Luz Auditorium, but this time we have to hold it here for some security reasons. We need to be very careful. And now this is the time that you can ask your question. I know after hearing Maria Ressa's talk, I know there are a lot of questions that you would want to ask her. But let me just point this out, that for our students, I know you've learned a lot this afternoon. And it boils down to what Silliman is inculcating in all of us, the whole person education that focuses on competence, character, and faith. So let me see a hand who will get to ask the first question. Maria is now ready to answer your questions. Yes? Can I see? Yes, go ahead, sir. There are microphones at the sides. Please introduce yourself first.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Arnold Valdes. Thank you. I would like to ask what keeps you going other than your faith? Other than your faith, what encourages you the most, but equally important, what discourages you the most?
Oh my gosh, Simon, that's hard. Okay, I'll try to answer quickly because I have questions for you guys, especially those in the divinity school. What encourages me the most? Good God, we survived 6 years of constant attacks. Not only did we survive, we thrived, right? Thank you for helping us. Dickens said it, the best of times, the worst of times, right? We're still working through it. But I would say I think you'd agree with me, the fear has lifted. And now it's a different time, and this is a question for every Filipino. What do you want to create, right? What world do we want to create? My team, the Rapplers, holy cow. So once we got when the government first tried to shut us down in January 2018, I called the General Assembly. There were about 100 of us. The first thing we did was we did a press conference, and we forgot to tell our lawyers we were going to do it. So they weren't pleased. But, it was infuriating because it was... So what I did is I told every Rappler, we're walking into a new place. Because Rappler at that point, the median age was 23 years old. We were very young. and we were 63% women. And I was worried that the parents were worried. Yeah, diba? Like, and I wanted to jump ahead. So we had a General Assembly, and I said, it's gonna be different this time. And this isn't for everyone. Everyone has a different risk threshold. So if you want, and if you just talk to your supervisor, and we will help place you somewhere else. We lost our tech, we lost some sales, but none of the journalists took anything like that. My co-founders, Glenda Gloria and Beth Frondoso, and Chaya Filenya, they give me great hope, right? Fantastic, because one person can't do this alone. I talk a lot, but who runs the company, diba? And what doesn't give me hope? Generative AI, right? Because if you've tried generative AI, it's the very same mistakes we made with social media. And the harms of social media have not been addressed. You would have seen last year that Dmitry Muratov and I, along with about 300 Nobel laureates and civil rights activists and human rights activists, we came up with a 10-point action plan that boils to 3 things. We have to stop surveillance for profit. This is just like big tobacco, right? This is just like, it is harmful to us. And this is spoken by the person who tried to convince you to get on social media in 2012, right? We helped the growth of social media in the Philippines. So the first was stop surveillance for profit. This is taking us and manipulating us insidiously. The second was stop coded bias. If you are a brown or black woman, the AI would not recognize you. They're coded bias, coded into it by the Silicon Valley coders, right? Because they're made by people. And there's no safety standards they have to go through. And finally, the last one, the third part is journalism as an antidote to tyranny, right? So, but for me, I will say our greatest challenge right now, and it's funny, it's not even a political thing in the Philippines. Look, you didn't ask me this, but I will say, I wish this government well. They're going to have to deal with hard-hitting journalism, but where they go, we all go, right? And we elected them.
Okay, so there's another question. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Isaac.
Hi, Isaac.
My question is, you speak about being honest with oneself and believing in the good, right? So I guess the question is that at a time like now, we have many groups who are picking sides, and they say that their version of the truth is them being honest with themselves. So now we find that there are now different versions of the truth. So the question, I guess, is how do you respond with their version of the truth when perhaps their version of the truth, subjective as it is, leads to more harm than good?
I love your question, Isaac. Well, number one, I don't really talk about truth as much as I talk facts, right? The number of people in this room is a fact. That's not debatable. That we are in Silliman University in Dumaguete is not debatable, right? Except that if somebody wanted to do information operations to get someone to believe that we're in New York City, and they pound that lie 1,000,000 times, some people will believe that Silliman University is in New York City, right? So I go back to the facts. In the last elections, we did the Facts First PH, and there are now initiatives to roll out something like this, a whole of society approach for facts. In the US, they would call it bipartisan, because you're already dealing with a divided political system, a polarized political system. This is the same kind of polarization that radicalization and extremism, that terrorists go through. Right? The reason why I was so focused on this polarization is this is what I tracked after 9/11. I looked at And you guys do know that the first pilot recruited by Al-Qaeda was arrested in the Philippines in 1995, diba? His name was Abdul Hakim Murad, and he was in Supermax prison when 9/11 happened. Anyway, so I don't think the facts are debatable. I think we got to go beyond the polarized politics. It's not about politics. That's two. The third one is, can we not learn from history? If we look at all of these studies, which social media has used, it's in-group versus out-group. Things spread fastest when it is us against them, right? It encourages anger and hate, except it's a gladiator's battle to the death, right? So, okay, let me make that clear. Look at what Hitler did in Germany. That is tribalism. That is us against them. We shouldn't continue this march of folly by touching this. It isn't us against them. I think this is where religion can come in, actually, again, right? Regardless of what religion you are, we have far more in common than we have differences.
Okay. Sir Leo?
Hello, my name is Leo Mamikpik. I'm a retiree. But
Hi, Leo.
I'm going to ask you something about injustice.
Please?
What do you think needs to happen in order for Laila to regain her freedom?
I can cite a lot of facts to you, right? So we did a lot of studies of the information operations that tore Laila de Lima apart. Starting with, you guys remember how Congress did the very sexist, but again, like, it happened in the Philippines, but so did Trump in the US, right? This kind of sexist, the photos, the videos that were fake that went around, and how Laila de Lima literally was, her character, it was beyond character assassination, and it went to, very similar, it went to dehumanization. Dehumanization is a tactic from Nazi Germany, right? It is one step to violence, right? So let me answer directly your question. Let me do the careful journalist answer, which is, the justice system says that they are going through it. But let me respond as a person who's really followed this. I spoke with Laila de Lima. I saw Laila, and she was given a chance to ask for house arrest. She chose not to, because she is standing on principle. She will win these cases. So what will it take to have her released? I think you have both ways. Because actually the best part about the Marcos administration to me seems that it cares about the rest of the world, number one. Right? We're part of a global community again. There have been significant international and domestic questions about Laila de Lima. And the easy way is for the government to say it's in the courts. But the brave leadership way will be to actually deal with it and correct the wrongs. But I'm the wrong person to speak. You know why? I still have 3 criminal charges left.
Thank you, Sir Leo. We have another question from Sir Ian.
Hi, my name is Ian Rosales Casogot. I teach creative writing in Silliman. I'm also a contributor to Rappler, actually.
Thank
and
you.
A few years ago, I actually founded the Keyless Chronicles, which tried to compile all the literature about, protest literature during Duterte's time. But that got shut down by Facebook, and no matter how much I tried to let it be reinstated, they refused to. But that's not my question. My question basically has something to do with what you said about what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I actually had another question in mind, but when you said that, I think I need to ask another question, because in Dumaguete right now, in Negociental, we've we've been through a lot of political crisis lately.
Yes.
The murders and so on and so
Yes.
forth. But this thing that happened this year, actually everybody knows this. This was a long time in coming. People were talking about this secretly. But nobody was writing about this because there was such a huge fear in the community if we wanted to talk about it publicly. And actually, every time I would post something about it on Facebook before, I always would get private messages in Facebook, don't say anything because we don't want you to die. And in Dumaguete, we've had so many journalists who have been killed already. So there is always a danger. So my question is, how do we break through that fear in a community, especially a small one like Dumaguete, to speak out when there really is imminent danger?
Well, first, thank you for your courage. This has come to us in many different ways, right? And as a journalist, the hard part there is if you have somebody who is willing to step forward, you want to try to help make sure that they're protected. And if you're the journalist, you want to make sure that you have enough resources to make sure you can keep going. Having said that, what we've found is that these stories need to be told because they will always inevitably erupt. And so, what's the way to do it? Communities, 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 right? So the first step, my gosh, it's kind of how Rappler survived, right? How were we able to survive? Even though there was such a heavy atmosphere of fear, people were supporting us behind the scenes. Our legal fees escalated beyond anything we could have paid. And so many, I think the best lesson I ever got during that time period was the generosity of strangers. And I don't mean just money. People put themselves on the line. And there are many more stories that are out there. Like, they come to us, and so if you know it, right, and yeah, you know, I'm always the person that they'll file the case again, so I should be careful what I say. But you go to Glenda. No, let me do it this way. You have to choose your battle. You have to choose your team going into battle, and you have to be ready for the worst. We've done these stories. We can keep doing the stories. I think you cannot do it alone. That you're not alone. I think you should come here because I keep hearing you.
I have a question. So, my name is Dr. Francis Yap. I'm an eye surgeon by profession, but people know me in the community as an activist. Yes, and my question, thank you for the recognition, much needed. And my question is, I use a lot of social media, especially Instagram and Facebook. Almost everybody I know, I've maxed out my friends already, and my Instagram is slowly growing. And I use social media to bring the community closer and well-informed. I take the pains of daily posting, standing up against my main issue is about the reclamation. But amongst that it's the core of the truth and standing by principle. So it's been a daily personal struggle that I've dragged all my friends, and if they have no choice. But my question is, do you still encourage using social media to fight against this? So that, because am I feeding the dragon that will eventually burn my house down? By the way, I post daily bikini pictures with captions about the truth and fighting. So it's my tactic. Everybody can vouch for that. I am in my bikini every day, posting it on social media. with all my captions to fight against the issues that need to be brought out. So that was my question.
No, no, no. It's a great question. And I haven't forgotten. I know you left. I was actually going to ask if Glenda or Beth had anything to add to the journalist who. Okay, let's talk afterwards. Your question. I would say the jury is out, but my sense is that it is like the dragon eating its tail, right? So let me tell you how it works, so you know, right? Everything you post is picked up by, they use machine learning to build a model of you. That model, depending on what you do on Facebook, includes your family and friends. It includes if you do the dating app, if you do the marketplace, it includes all of that data. And every other data they can get of you. So now replace the word model with clone. So they clone each of us, and then what they do is AI comes in and takes all of our clones, and that becomes the motherlode database for micro-targeting, which they sell, right? So that's the way that advertising model works. And what they do is they pick the ad to nudge you at your weakest moment. Right? This is why I call it behavior modification, because you can spend very little money, and these have been used in political campaigns, right? So it depends on your community, right? Can you close it? They now have encrypted channels. We are thinking through how we do this. Stay tuned before the end of the year. We really will have a tech build out that hopefully will give a place where we can be safe, where you are not going to be manipulated, and where you can speak. Because democracy and press freedom is not just about pushing out loudly, it is also about listening and thinking and changing each other's minds, right? We have to give that space. So I'm so sorry I don't have a concrete answer for you. I will say that I now sit on several things that are working global. The first is the Internet Governance Forum at the UN. I'm one of 10 people that the UN Secretary General chose to find some solution for what is wrong with the internet. That's the first. But the UN moves at a very slow pace. Number one. Number two, I don't mean that in a bad way, but it really is. Anyway, and then the second thing is, journalists need to survive and find tech that isn't cannibalizing us. And that's part of the reason I co-chair with Mark Thompson, the former chair. He ran the New York Times. He was BBC Director General. It's called the International Fund for Public Interest Media. We're trying to look for ways to deal with this. And I'm part of 4 or 5 other things because that problem is not in the Philippines. It is global. There's a law that is out in the EU that we're trying to make sure connects to us in the Philippines. So I'm so sorry, I don't have an easy answer. In the meantime, build your community. But I would say this, right? Be careful of how you are being manipulated. Yeah.
Yes, you can introduce yourself.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Ms. Ressa.
Hi.
I'm Andre Elizalde from the College of Mass Communication. And
Yay!
Yes. So congratulations to my fellow friends in the organizing team. You guys did a good job. I apologize muna kasi this might be a lengthy question. I really want to contextualize it.
Go.
Because this is a pressing matter right now for our generation. And before I ask my question to Ms. Ressa, I'd like to ask my fellow students, who among you for the first time registered to vote last year? I think many of us here. I'd like to ask another question. Who among you, my fellow students, voted in the previous national election for the first time?
For the first time.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Go ahead, Aldrich.
Ever since, Andre po, si Aldrich din siya, Ma'am, Andre po. Ever since the last national elections, pink has become an important color. Hence my blazer of choice
He's
for
wearing
today.
a pink blazer.
Yes, I chose. Also cute siya, ang color. Thank you. Pink has become an important color for our youth. For Filipinos like me, like my classmates, like my friends, and like my family. Ever since the last national elections, many of us young Filipinos started to engage in politics more and more. Ever since the last national elections, many of us young Filipinos braved the uncharted waters of Philippine politics. And ever since the last national elections, many of us young Filipinos started to face the consequences of being political. In a world where our government constantly antagonizes radical, outspoken, and critical citizens, what can you say to us young Filipinos who continue to battle these powers?
Keep going. I mean, so what do I mean by that, right? Part of it is you must, because in the end, this goes with your values, right? And the second part is that the world, and I don't just mean the Philippines, the world literally is at an existential moment, right? We haven't discussed climate change. I mean, how hot is it, right? The Philippines hit 44 degrees like a month or so ago. 44 degrees Celsius. I don't know if you remember when I was with CNN, when India hit 33 degrees, it was big news. Global warming is real. This is only going to be solved through political will, right? So beyond that, Al Gore, in March, I was in London and I was the first speaker, Al Gore was the second speaker. So I was talking about how the corruption of our information ecosystem is critical, that democracy will die. And Al Gore comes up second and he says, we cannot solve the climate crisis until we solve the democracy crisis. And we will not do that if we do not fix our information ecosystem. Right? So everything is broken, is what I'm saying. And I think what we need to do is to go back to the real world and organize our communities. Organize based on our values. And are there risks? Well, obviously, you can see the risks, right? Like, there are risks. But I think this is something we talked about in Rappler. I would hate to look back a decade from now and know that we didn't do our best, right? Because we don't know what will happen. I've seen these time period compared to right before World War I, and in the Nobel lecture, I compared it. I compared what happened to our information ecosystem to the atom bomb exploding, right? It is that existential. So, yes, figure out who you are. Because here's your added burden, and this connects to your question. This generation is looking for meaning. It is it's a rite of passage for human beings. We search for meaning, right? But with the information ecosystem corrupted as is, you are a commodity that is living a performative life. You're performing for everyone else, pushing meaning sometimes out of your reach. That means you must come together more to talk about what is really important. Find your tribe, but I hope, like I said, lay it out, embrace your fear, be prepared. But if we don't fight for our values, then we aren't who we say we are.
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes, we have another question from this side. Go ahead. Introduce yourself first.
So, hello, good afternoon po.
Good afternoon.
I'm Anastasia Alcantara from the Department of Pharmacy, an ex-student journalist because my course has taken over my life. But anyways, I'm glad you mentioned the climate crisis in the previous question because my question is, what are your thoughts on the intersectionality of the silencing of our local journalists and local climate activists, especially when it comes to the government and big corporations or business owners? And my follow-up question to that is what measures can be taken to lessen this from happening?
Wow. Yeah, it's huge. It's a quick, easy answer. No. I think the first is that, let me say one thing that we haven't talked about at all, which is that not only is the design of our technology platforms rewarding the bad, right? So the incentive structure is for lies, we're in the upside down. But beyond that, these very same tech companies that are being used to kill the reputation of news organizations are also the ones that are getting the advertising dollars, pesos. So it is power and money. So what we're dealing with globally is that news organizations, the business model for news is dead. Advertising is dead largely, right? So the struggle for every news organization today is to find innovative ways of surviving so they can keep telling difficult stories, even as the attacks and harassment and killings of journalists increase, right? That's what's happened over the last decade. So the first is the business model. We need to fix the business model. Again, part of the reason I took time away from Rappler and put time into the International Fund for Public Interest Media is because last year we raised about $50 million, and that money is going to be a stopgap measure that will be given in grants to news organizations in the Global South. Right? So we need to make sure journalism survives while it is still looking for a business model. So that's the first. The second, what's embedded in your question really is that local journalism, well, for one, we know the red tagging has it's rampant and fear is rampant. But has fear lifted or not really?
Not really.
Not really. Here. Oh yeah, of course, my gosh. Okay. So this requires this requires both conscious organization and it requires money, business community. It's a tough one, right? So part of what happened, what we did, let me give you an example from Manila so that it's not so, because this one is an easy one. Facts First PH was about 150 different groups, 16 news organizations, about 116 civil society groups, NGOs, the church was part of it, business groups joined. The third layer were 8 academic institutions, and the fourth layer were 6 legal groups. Right? It was a whole of society approach to protect the facts. And what happened when the business community came in is it brought, does anyone remember how EDSA really happened? The tipping point was a business leader, right? So just to go back to that, right? It cannot be, the attacks will happen, will always happen, unfortunately, because absolute power wants, people who can get absolute power want absolute power. And as we're pushing back, organization is the critical part, collaboration is the critical part. In the immediate short term, all hell broke loose. What are the stories that are being done right now? I know we're doing a bunch on Rappler, but what are the other things? What can we do? Right? Because in the end, fear is a tool of tyrants. And silence is complicity. But don't be foolish either, right? Like, do this methodically. Because this time is such a critical time. I'm so sorry I don't have better words than that.
It's okay, Ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yes. From this side, introduce yourself first.
A pleasant afternoon. I am Keanu Sigako from the BS Foreign Affairs program in the School of Public Affairs and Governance in Silliman University. And my question now is oriented towards diplomacy.
Focus group?
A diplomat is an honest person sent abroad to tell a lie for the good of his country. As a journalist, what can you recommend to the future diplomats, to these foreign affairs students, especially with your definition of honesty, where diplomats are paid to tell a lie?
Iba-iba to eh. I have friends in the diplomatic community who stay quiet, right? They don't, some of them said through some of those years, I can't I don't know how to show my face. I guess it depends. It depends on the person again, right? I walked out of 2 jobs because I didn't believe that the direction we were headed was something I could support. But I think I'm very lucky. I'm still here, right? Like I'm lucky and I'm privileged, and I know that. So every person has that barrier. The decision is never out of your hands, right? So it's a choice that each of us, again, I go back to the jihad. Oh, I like that. The individual, in the Nobel lecture, I talked about the individual battle for truth, the individual battle for integrity. Because, I came back to the Philippines in 1986, and it was after the euphoria of people power. I couldn't fathom how that martial law period, how Marcos stayed in power for almost 21 years. Boy, I really got a great lesson in how in the Duterte administration. It is fear, it is complicity. So I didn't really answer your question, no? Except for AI, the AI part. But the other part is that not enough will stand up for the good. Because then, if we don't, look, I don't think we have that many. I think we have 2 or 3 years before democracy dies. I've actually, what I'll do is I'll tweet. Last May, I closed the Nobel Summit in DC at the National Academy of Sciences. And I actually gave, if you look at all the elections around the world, starting this year, we counted 90 elections globally. And they've now been going through, right? But what we saw was that the tipping point for democracy is going to happen in 2024. Because think about it like this. If you don't have integrity of facts, you cannot have integrity of elections, right? So if we continue to elect illiberal leaders democratically, those leaders will crush the institutions of their countries from within, and they will ally together, right? So one of the things that we've seen is Putin helping Belarus. Belarus would be a democracy today if Putin hadn't helped them. So this autocracy Inc. is actually taking shape, has already taken shape. Long answer to your question of everybody will need to make a choice. Make sure it's a choice you'll be proud of.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, we have another question from this side.
Good afternoon. My name's Daryl Lareño. I'm a political science graduate from
Hi,
the
Daryl.
University of the Philippines. I just remember we were talking about you in class, and now it's an honor to be in your presence. Someone who really stood up and continues to stand up to a dictator. Thank you for that. So my question is, Mr. Pink guy talked earlier. Mr. Pink Blazer talked about how currently our community is now more engaged in politics, may it be in social media, in communities. Earlier you also talked about dichotomy and polarization that has emancipated from this whole debate on facts and truth. And one of the most relevant and fresh dichotomy, in my opinion, we have right now is the 31 million versus 14 million narrative, and I think you all can relate to that. Of course, I know the frustrations are valid, and unfortunately, the joy that the 31 million feels right now are also valid. We can't take it away from them. My question now is, how do we talk and translate about facts and truth to someone whose primary endeavor in life is to put food on the table, send their children to school, and in the most basic aspect of it, survive one day at a time?
Yeah. The easy way is to actually tell them they deserve better, right? So the first, look, This barong is by sorry, I never do this, but I will because you reminded me. It's done by a Filipina Canadian. It's Vinta. You know what's written on the back? Contra katatagan. It's against resilience, because the idea is that we've had such bad governments that we've had to be so resilient. We deserve better governments, diba? So the thing is that, yes, the struggle, and it has gotten worse. Inflation is really high. The words can be twisted in 10 million ways. And it was always a struggle, even before, because of our culture, to ask our people to demand. Right? But we do deserve better. So, there are grassroots community groups that are doing this, that are helping them. Especially, we've talked about the brutal drug war. The police now say that the number of people killed is just a little over 6,000 people. I remember January 2017, the number of people killed was already over 7,000. What did we do? Just get collective amnesia? Diba? Like, the number of people killed is the biggest loss in our battle for facts. So, parang, I guess, our NGOs, our grassroots organizations, and we work with so many of them, right? These are all stitching together. There's no way that speaking English the way I do, although I've gone to Fisherman's Village, I've gone to areas, because as a reporter, that's been the wonderful privilege that we get. But there really are grassroots groups working that need more help. So that's part of what we can do. And, that question kasi is, the premise there is that they don't care. But guess what? They do. Let's just talk about the Intel funds. Because that is money taken out of something else, right? So budget season is up, folks. Let's talk about it.
Okay, thank you. We will have the last two questions because after this we will still have the book launch properly. So yes, go ahead, Miss Pink.
Hello. Okay.
If we have a Mr. Pink, we have a Miss Pink.
Hello,
okay.
Mr.
Okay. Hello, I'm Tiara. I'm a freshman here at Silliman University Senior High School, and I'm still a teenager. So, as someone that young, I'm still trying to find my calling. So, a very simple question: when was the moment that you realized that journalism and fighting for democracy and for the truth was your calling? Was there a certain issue that lit a fire in you and made you the incredible advocate that you are?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I'll give you a quick, long answer. There are phases in our lives, like, I'm turning 60 this year, so I don't mind if you know. so parang ganito siya, right? You'll see it in my book. At 10 years old, you remember a lot of things in 10 years old. But in your 20s, that's a time of massive exploration. Your 30s, you begin to make a choice. You make your choice in your 30s. Your 40s, you're master of the universe. 50s is reinvention for me, and I still don't know what 60s will be, right? So for me, it was that in my 20s, I came back to the Philippines, and I was only supposed to be here for a year, and I never left. And I fell into journalism. I didn't study journalism. I was pre-med and pre-law, and I took English and theater and dance. I was a mutt. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it is okay not to know what you want to do, right? Because it's the period of exploration. And please remember, right, because everyone is getting pushed to tech, you gotta engage left brain, right brain. That is our humanity, right? So I think for me it was, what I loved about journalism was in my 20s when CNN gave me the power to do stories, and it tests you intellectually, physically, emotionally, spiritually, or mock, right? Find something that challenges you. Make the choice to learn, and then get really good at it. I think my 40s was, I decided to come back to the Philippines. Actually, I decided when I turned 40, I was going to choose my home. Because I couldn't decide. Indonesia, US, the Philippines, and I chose the Philippines.
Thank you. The last but not the least. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sharon. I'm currently a technical cross-cultural trainer for the USP score here in the Philippines.
Wow.
I think my question is not part of the intellectual discourse. This is a very personal question.
Sure.
What is a daily ritual of a Maria Ressa that keeps your spirit this high and even transcends all over the world? Maybe, you can give us more inspiration, like maybe you have a favorite coffee and yeah. Baka pwedeng tularan.
Iba-iba kasi COVID changed everything, diba? Did you change your, the COVID lockdown changed it? But I was writing this book during the COVID lockdown. And so I was waking up at 4:45 so I could make my coffee. And then I was writing from 5 a.m. to about 11 a.m. every day. And then Glenda wakes up at like 6 or 5:30. Like the two manangs are early morning, two manangs are late night. So we cover 24 hours. And then the day is never, this is why I love the news. Oh my God, it's even worse now, right? Like, you wake up and you just go, what happened while I slept? And I didn't sleep for that long. But always, I think that for us, Rappler became a laboratory for us, for me. My colleagues, my co-founders will speak differently because they literally ran. I pulled out on disinformation. So I no longer have an editorial role. I do tech, data, and our business, right? So, and part of that is, when the government files these arrest warrants against you and you have the Secretary of Justice, my first question is going to be, why are you trying to arrest me, right? It's like, it's very hard to not, especially when I was being targeted, they politicized me. So it was hard to do my job as a reporter. So there were lots of other things. But what I found was the research we did in the Philippines on disinformation, on information operations, we were the testing ground, right? The Cambridge Analytica whistleblower, Chris Wiley, in 2019, he told me that this was the petri dish for Cambridge Analytica. You remember? Cambridge Analytica, the most number of compromised accounts were American accounts. But the country with the second most number of compromised accounts was the Philippines. Right? We were their proxies. So they wanted to attack America, they tested it here. And this isn't the second time it's happened. The first was 9/11, right? So yeah, sorry, what a long thing. I love that you wake up every day and you look at the day with fresh eyes. And then, we have an organization we're trying to build. Sometimes we pull our hair out. Oh, wait, here.
Hindi ka niya sinagot.
Oo,
Ako
alam ko
nagsasagot
yun.
sa'yo. 3 things.
Sige.
Well, even if Maria grew up in the States, she cannot last a day na hindi siya kakain ng rice.
Ayan. Pinoy
Rice.
nga.
So, Pilipino siya talaga. Rice in the morning, rice in the afternoon, rice in the evening.
Ayun.
Maria cannot work on an empty stomach. At 7 p.m., her stomach churns. And she goes to us, let's have dinner. And we'll go, so, go ahead and have dinner. So she cannot think if she's hungry. Sorry, Maria.
Third pa.
What's that?
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Okay. I've asked permission from Maria, and she's okay with this. We can entertain the last two questions. Yes, the lady in the yellow skirt. Can you do that? Can you ask her question?
Good
now?
afternoon, Dr. Ressa. I am Alana. I teach literature in Silliman. I'm also the Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. I feel now that my question is a little foolish, having heard all those questions before. But anyway, I like it that you said democracy is not only about expression, but it's also about listening. And I think Friends of Friends broke democracy, but it was not without our help. And I often think that Lenny lost, we lost, because we were not kind enough to bring others to our camp. So I see that in Facebook. All this name calling, all these Dutertards, all these idiots, these pink people calling the other camp butol, bugo, stupid, no, idiotic. And I think that is how we lost other people, because I notice that it is not just social media, it's also social, political, socio-cultural, socio-economic contexts playing in the field. And that's why I tell my students, be gentle. Do not arrogate unto yourself the monopoly of knowledge and articulateness.
Yes.
And I think I like it that you said, do not be a monster to fight a monster. So I think this goes for young people. Be gentle, because I think that is what causes polarization. And if I'm going to say it, I don't have much clout as you have. So perhaps this is the time, Dr. Ressa, to tell them, be silent and listen. It comes from the Nobel Peace Prize awardee. And one more thing, Dr. Ressa, photo op naman after, ha?
Thank you. Now we will have the last question from Sir Pitts Guerrero.
Good afternoon. My first question is, we haven't heard a question or response from the Divinity School. Any question from the Divinity School? But anyway, my
asked
question
a question
is,
from the Divinity School professors.
anyway, you started your talk with talking about the values you learned from the world religions, Eightfold Paths, Noble Truths, and all that, and then you followed it up with your Catholic Christian upbringing, about values and all that. Now, my question is, what about the church?
Yeah.
Do you think at this time the church has failed in its about role to be the guardian of morality, about the purveyors of truth and values and all that, with what's happening in our country?
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for your question. Let me pull global and let me go local. The global one is, and this is again something the Manangs know, like I was really surprised by the Vatican and by Pope Francis, and how Pope Francis, as he pushes for change, is also pulled back by members of by the bishops, by the cardinals also there, right? He could only move so far, right? I see the same, this is already at the Vatican. I think here in the Philippines, sorry, let me finish that thought. I still have great hope, right? Because in the end, I think this is the best part of our humanity. And I don't just mean one religion. I feel like, if I were to quantify and this was freshman year when I took those 5 world religions, even the Upanishads, Hinduism, the 5 major tenets don't vary across all of these 5 major world religions. So it feels to me like the old world bureaucracy is pulling back progressive leadership. In the Philippines, I'm speaking to the bishops on September 18, so I should be careful what I say. I think we're looking for leadership on every front. I I am, in the end, a reporter. You know, I started as a reporter and remain a journalist. So being here has been incredible because it reminds me again of this. I think, I'm not answering your question. Let me answer it very directly. I think there's an opportunity for real leadership to transform faith into something we live with every day that can rally us together, that can remind us of the goodness of humanity. That remains.
Okay.